In a quiet corner of the world, where the damp mist of the valley meets the ancient, towering pine forests, there stood a small shop with a weathered wooden sign that creaked softly in the gentle evening wind. The sign bore no written name, only the faint, carved outline of a key and a glowing lantern, worn smooth by years of soft rain and golden autumn sunshine. Inside, the shop was filled with the rhythmic ticking of grandfather clocks, the vanilla scent of aged paper, and the sweet, calming aroma of dried lavender. Silas, an elderly man with eyes like quiet mountain lakes, spent his days here. Silas was a mender of things that time had forgotten. He did not search for grand treasures. Instead, he welcomed the chipped teapots, the brass keys that no longer turned, and the delicate music boxes whose melodies had faltered. He believed that everything carried a secret memory, and that with enough patience and care, those sleeping memories could be gently awakened. His hands, though lined with the tracks of age, were steady and incredibly gentle. On a cold autumn evening, as a light drizzle began to patter against the window panes, a traveler left a small wooden crate on his counter and departed. Inside the crate, nestled in dry, golden straw, was a single teacup made of porcelain so thin and delicate it was almost translucent. Silas lifted it with 2 fingers, marveling at how light it felt, as if it were made of nothing but cool air and quiet, forgotten thoughts. It was painted a deep, rich midnight blue that seemed to hold a soft, shimmering depth. When Silas held it to the window's waning light, he saw a silver mountain path winding up toward a crescent moon, surrounded by a constellation of tiny, hand-painted stars that glowed with a pearlescent luster. The teacup was chipped slightly along the rim, a tiny crescent-shaped mark that looked like another moon. Yet, when Silas touched the cool porcelain, a surprising warmth spread through his fingers, as if the cup had just been filled with hot water, though it was empty and cold. He set it down on his oak workbench. The soft light of his oil lamp cast long, flickering shadows across the room, and the blue teacup seemed to absorb the amber light, glowing with an inner peace that Silas had never felt from any other object in his shop. Silas took a piece of soft flannel and began to clean the cup, wiping away the dust of its long journey. With each gentle stroke of the cloth, the midnight blue glaze seemed to deepen, and the silver stars on the mountain path appeared to twinkle in the firelight. He felt a quiet joy in this simple task, letting his breath synchronize with the rhythm of his hands. The rain outside grew steadier, creating a rhythmic song that blended with the ticking clocks. Silas decided it was time to brew a special tea, one that would match the cup's beauty. He reached for his glass jars, selecting dried chamomile blossoms, blue cornflower petals, and a hint of sweet lemon verbena. He placed them into a silver infuser and set his copper kettle upon the wood-burning stove. As the water began to heat, the stove hummed a warm, comforting tune, and the scent of dry wood smoke mingled with the herbal fragrance of the room. Silas sat in his high-backed armchair, watching the steam rise in gentle curls toward the dark wooden beams above, feeling the day's fatigue begin to melt away into the shadows. When the kettle whistled soft and low, Silas poured the steaming water over the herbs. The steam rose in a fragrant cloud, carrying the sweet, clean scent of the earth after rain. He let the tea steep, watching the water turn a golden amber color, reflecting the warm glow of the hearth. The shop was silent now, save for the steady rain. Silas carefully poured the hot tea into the midnight blue teacup. The moment the hot liquid touched the porcelain, a soft, musical chime echoed through the quiet room, like a distant silver bell. Silas gasped softly as he looked down at his work. The steam rising from the teacup was not white, but a gentle, luminous violet. It drifted upward, swirling in slow, mesmerizing patterns that seemed to mimic the shape of the silver mountain painted on the cup. As the violet steam spread, the air in the shop grew cooler, and the scent of fresh jasmine and wet earth filled the room. The painted stars on the teacup began to shine more brightly, casting small, soft points of light onto Silas's wooden workbench. Silas raised the cup to his lips, feeling its warmth against his dry hands. The porcelain felt incredibly smooth, almost like a polished river stone. He took a slow, deliberate sip. The tea was warm and sweet, tasting of honey and wild lavender. As he swallowed, a wave of gentle warmth washed over him, starting from his chest and radiating outward to his fingertips. His eyes grew heavy, and the ticking of the clock seemed to slow down, transforming into a distant, soothing heartbeat that matched his own calm breathing. With his eyes half closed, Silas looked at the silver path painted on the teacup. It no longer looked flat. Instead, the path seemed to stretch out into the distance, winding through a forest of silver pine trees that swayed in a silent wind. He felt as though he were standing at the beginning of that path, looking up at the silver mountain. The air around him was cool and fresh, and the ground beneath his feet was covered in soft, silver moss that felt like a thick velvet carpet under his boots. He took another sip of the tea, and the shop around him began to fade like mist in the morning sun. The wooden walls, the ticking clocks, and the rain outside disappeared, replaced by the quiet serenity of the painted valley. Silas was no longer an old man in a shop, he was a wanderer in a world of starlight and dreams. He took a step forward onto the silver path, his boots making no sound on the soft moss. The silence was deep and comforting, a blanket of peace that enveloped him. Above him, the crescent moon hung like a silver cradle in a sky of deep indigo. The stars were not distant points of light, but small, glowing lanterns that floated gently in the air, casting a warm, golden glow over the pathway. Silas walked slowly, taking in the sights and sounds of this dreamscape. He could hear the faint, musical murmur of a nearby stream, its waters glowing with a soft blue light as they flowed over smooth, silver pebbles. The air was calm, carrying the fragrance of sleeping flowers. The path led him down toward the edge of the stream, where large, glowing water lilies floated on the water's surface. Their petals were a soft pink, and they pulsed with a gentle light that matched the heartbeat of the valley. Silas sat on a large, flat stone by the water, watching the ripples spread. He dipped his hand into the stream, the water was warm and felt like liquid silk. As he pulled his hand out, small droplets of light clung to his fingers before drifting away like tiny fireflies. As Silas watched the droplets float, a soft rustling sound came from the branches of a weeping willow tree that overhung the stream. Its long, silver leaves dipped into the water, creating gentle circles. From the branches, a small, silver-furred squirrel peered down at him. The squirrel had large, dark eyes that shone with wisdom and curiosity. It held a tiny acorn that glowed like a miniature star. Silas smiled and held out his hand, and the squirrel descended the branch to greet him. The air felt warm and welcoming. The squirrel hopped onto Silas's palm, its tiny paws warm and soft. It placed the glowing acorn in his hand and looked up at him, chirping softly. Silas felt a sudden, deep understanding. This acorn was a fragment of a forgotten dream, a memory of a child's wish for adventure. He closed his hand around the acorn, feeling a brief, joyful vision of sailing on a ship made of clouds. When he opened his hand, the acorn had vanished, leaving only a lingering warmth and a sense of light-hearted joy. The squirrel bowed its head and scurried back up the willow tree, disappearing into the silver leaves. Silas stood up, feeling lighter and more energized. He continued along the silver path, which now began to climb the slopes of the silver mountain. The air grew cooler and carried the crisp, clean scent of snow and pine. The pine trees here were tall and majestic, their branches laden with silver needles that caught the starlight and sparkled like diamonds. He felt a quiet strength in his legs as he walked. As Silas walked higher, he noticed that the pathway was lined with small, glowing flowers that looked like glass bells. When the gentle breeze blew through the forest, the flowers swayed and produced a faint, musical tinkling, like a distant lullaby played on a glass harp. The sound was incredibly soothing, wrapping around Silas like a warm cloak. He closed his eyes for a moment, listening to the forest's song, letting the peaceful melody wash away any remaining worries or thoughts of his shop in the waking world. The path wound around a large, moss-covered boulder, revealing a small clearance in the forest. In the center of the clearance stood a magnificent stag, its coat a deep silver blue and its antlers glowing like branches of pure light. The stag stood perfectly still, looking at Silas with a calm, steady gaze. Silas felt a sense of reverence and stopped, bowing his head to the majestic creature. The stag nodded in return, its antlers casting long, glowing shadows across the silver moss. The forest was silent, respecting the quiet meeting. The stag took a few steps toward Silas, its hooves glowing slightly with each step. It stopped just a few feet away, breathing out a soft, warm mist that smelled of cedar and wild berries. Silas reached out his hand, and the stag leaned its head forward, allowing him to touch its forehead. The fur was incredibly soft, and Silas felt a deep sense of safety and protection. He knew that this stag was the guardian of the mountain, watching over the dreams of the valley. A peaceful bond formed between them. The stag stepped back, turned, and walked slowly into the forest, its glowing antlers disappearing among the silver pine trees. Silas continued his journey up the mountain. The path grew steeper, but he felt no tiredness. Instead, his steps felt effortless, as if the mountain itself were helping him climb. The stars above seemed to draw closer, their golden light filling the sky and creating a beautiful canopy that illuminated the entire valley below. He felt a deep connection to the sky and the ground beneath him. Looking down, Silas could see the entire dreamscape spread out beneath him. The glowing stream looked like a winding ribbon of blue light, and the water lilies appeared as tiny pink stars floating in the dark. The valley was a place of absolute peace, far removed from the noise and haste of the waking world. It was a sanctuary where thoughts could rest and dreams could grow, protected by the silver mountain and the stars. Silas took a deep breath, filling his lungs with the clean, starlit air. Silas reached a small stone archway that spanned the path. The archway was covered in climbing roses that had silver petals and gold centers, glowing softly in the dark. As Silas walked under the arch, the scent of roses filled his senses, warm and comforting. He felt a deep sense of belonging, as if he had walked this path many times before in his thoughts. The path beyond the arch was paved with smooth, white stones that reflected the moon's light. Each step brought him closer to the mountain summit. The white stones led him to a small, circular terrace at the top of the mountain. In the center of the terrace sat a beautiful stone well, its rim carved with ancient symbols of sleep and dreams. The well was filled to the brim with a glowing, silver liquid that swirled slowly, like a pool of liquid starlight. A wooden bucket hung from a silver rope over the well. Silas approached the well, feeling a quiet curiosity about what it held, the air still and expectant. As Silas looked into the well, he saw faces and scenes shifting in the silver liquid. He saw a child laughing as they chased a butterfly, a farmer resting under a shady oak tree, and an artist painting a sunset. These were the dreams of the world, flowing together in this quiet well. Silas realized that the well was a reservoir of peace, collecting the happy thoughts and calm moments of people from all over the earth. It was a beautiful collection of humanity's quietest joys. Silas took the wooden handle of the bucket and lowered it into the silver liquid. The liquid made a soft, splashing sound that echoed gently in the quiet night. He drew the bucket back up, filled with the glowing starlight. He tipped the bucket slightly, letting a few drops of the liquid fall onto the stone floor of the terrace. As the drops touched the stones, they transformed into small, glowing butterflies that fluttered upward into the night sky, their wings shimmering with silver light. The butterflies flew higher and higher, joining the stars and adding their light to the sky. Silas watched them go, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. He realized that his task in this dream was to help release this database of peaceful thoughts into the world, sending them to those who needed rest and comfort. He dipped his hands into the bucket, feeling the cool, refreshing touch of the silver liquid, and scooped up a handful of starlight. The light felt like tiny, warm bubbles on his skin. He blew gently on his hands, and the starlight scattered into a cloud of tiny, glowing sparks that drifted away on the wind. The sparks floated down toward the valley, settling on the pine trees, the stream, and the water lilies, making them glow even brighter. Silas felt a warm connection to everything around him, a feeling of being part of a beautiful, living tapestry of peace and light. He sat down on the stone edge of the well, watching the valley shine in the night. The air was perfectly still, and the only sound was the faint, rhythmic ticking of a clock, though it sounded very far away. Silas closed his eyes, breathing in the scent of roses and pine. He felt a gentle hand on his shoulder and opened his eyes to see a kind, elderly woman standing beside him. She wore a robe of woven starlight and had silver hair that cascaded down her shoulders. Her face was familiar, though Silas could not remember her name. Her smile was warm and welcoming. She smiled at Silas, her eyes reflecting the glowing well. She told him that she was the weaver of dreams, and that the blue teacup was a vessel she had created to help people find their way to this valley of rest. She explained that when someone drank from the teacup with a quiet heart, they would be brought here to leave their worries behind and gather the peace of the starlight, carrying it back with them to the waking world. Silas listened, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. The weaver reached into her robe and pulled out a small, silver key. She handed it to Silas, and as it touched his hand, he felt a surge of creative energy. She told him that this key was to mend the broken dreams of others, and that he would find many such dreams in his shop. Silas looked at the key, which glowed with a soft blue light, and felt a deep sense of purpose. He thanked the weaver, bowing his head. She nodded, her expression filled with kindness. The weaver nodded and stepped back, blending into the silver mist that rose from the well. Silas was left alone on the terrace once more, but he did not feel lonely. Instead, he felt surrounded by the warmth and peace of the valley. He stood up and looked down at the well. The silver liquid was quiet now, reflecting the crescent moon and the stars above. Silas knew it was time for him to return, but he felt no sadness, only a quiet, enduring calm. He walked back through the stone archway, his footsteps light on the white stones. The climbing roses seemed to glow more brightly as he passed, their sweet scent bidding him farewell. As he walked down the mountain path, the silver pine trees rustled in a gentle wind, their needles producing a soft, whispering sound that seemed to say sleep, sleep, sleep. The sound was incredibly comforting, and Silas felt his eyes growing heavy once more. The silver path guided his feet with a gentle warmth. He reached the stream where the glowing water lilies floated. The silver-furred squirrel was waiting for him, sitting on the flat stone by the water. It held a small cup made of blue clay, filled with the glowing water of the stream. The squirrel held it out to Silas, chirping softly. Silas took the clay cup, thanking his small friend, and drank the water. It was cool and tasted of sweet rain and mint, instantly refreshing his mind and body. He returned the cup with a smile. As Silas finished the drink, the squirrel waved its tail and hopped back into the weeping willow tree. The scene around Silas began to soften and grow hazy. The stream, the trees, and the silver path began to dissolve into a warm, purple fog. Silas felt himself floating, drifting gently through the clouds of mist, feeling lighter than he ever had before. He was slowly returning to his shop, but he carried the peace of the valley with him, deep in his quiet soul. He opened his eyes slowly, finding himself back in his high-backed armchair. The fire in the wood-burning stove had burned down to a warm, red glow, casting soft shadows across the room. The rain outside had stopped, leaving a quiet stillness in the air. The grandfather clocks ticked slowly and rhythmically, their sound now familiar and comforting. The midnight blue teacup sat on the oak workbench in front of him, empty and cool to the touch. Silas reached out, running a finger along its smooth rim. Silas looked closely at the teacup. The silver mountain path painted on the porcelain seemed to have changed slightly. There was now a tiny, silver figure of a traveler walking along the path, just under the crescent moon. Silas smiled, knowing that the traveler was him, and that the path would always be waiting. He felt a deep sense of gratitude for the journey he had taken, and for the peace that now filled his heart, warming him from the inside out. The shop felt cozy. He stood up, his joints feeling loose and warm, free of the usual aches. He walked to the window and looked out into the night. The clouds had parted, revealing a clear sky filled with stars that looked exactly like the ones in the valley. The air was cool and fresh, and the town was quiet and asleep. Silas felt a sense of connection to everyone sleeping in their beds. He returned to his workbench and picked up the blue teacup, placing it carefully in a glass display cabinet. He knew that one day, another traveler would come seeking a way to the valley, and the teacup would be ready for them. For now, it would rest, holding the memories of Silas's journey safe within its blue glaze. Silas closed the cabinet door and turned off the oil lamp, plunging the shop into soft darkness. The ticking of the clocks continued their slow, steady lullaby. Only the glow from the wood-burning stove remained, casting a warm orange light on the wooden floorboards. Silas walked slowly to his bedroom, his thoughts quiet and peaceful. He climbed into his bed, pulling the thick, wool blanket up to his chin. The sheets felt cool and clean, and his pillow was soft and supportive. He lay still, listening to the quiet night, letting his breath slow to a steady, relaxed rhythm. He felt safe and warm, ready to let go of the day. As he closed his eyes, Silas felt the peace of the Silver Valley return to him. He could hear the faint rustling of the pine trees, the tinkling of the bellflowers, and the soft murmur of the stream. He felt the warmth of the stag's forehead and the light touch of the starlight. These memories wrapped around him like a cozy blanket, pushing away any lingering thoughts of the day and preparing him for a deep, restful sleep. The night was still and calm. His mind drifted, floating on a sea of quiet thoughts. He was no longer thinking in words, but in colors and feelings, the midnight blue of the teacup, the silver light of the moon, the warm purple of the steam. He felt himself sinking deeper into the mattress, his muscles completely relaxed, his breathing deep and even. The world outside his window was quiet, and the stars continued to watch over the sleeping valley. He surrendered to the darkness, feeling completely at peace. In his sleep, Silas returned to the mountain. He stood on the terrace by the well, looking up at the sky. The stars were bright and clear, and a gentle breeze blew through his hair. He felt a deep, abiding joy, knowing that he had found a place of true rest. The weaver of dreams stood beside him, her hand warm on his shoulder. Together, they watched the glowing butterflies flutter upward, carrying peace to the world. The starlight shone brightly on them. The dream was soft and gentle, with no sudden movements or loud sounds. It was a place of endless peace, where time did not matter and worries did not exist. Silas floated through the night, his spirit light and free. He visited the stream, saying hello to the silver squirrel, and walked through the pine forest, listening to the glass bells. Every corner of the valley was filled with a comforting, familiar warmth that cradled him in his deep sleep. As the night wore on, the dream grew even softer, the colors fading into gentle shades of gray and silver. The sounds grew quieter, melting into a single, continuous hum that was like the sound of the ocean heard from far away. Silas sank deeper into this quiet hum, his mind completely still. He was at rest, his body regenerating, his spirit finding peace in the sanctuary of the teacup stream. The universe felt small and warm around him. The clocks in the shop ticked on, marking the quiet hours of the night. The rain had washed the world clean, and a fresh, damp scent rose from the earth. The blue teacup in the cabinet glowed with a very faint, blue light, as if it were breathing in unison with Silas. The silver stars on its glaze seemed to twinkle in the darkness, a quiet beacon of peace in the sleeping shop. Everything was in perfect, silent harmony. In the valley, the moon began to set, its silver light fading as the first hints of dawn appeared on the horizon. The sky changed from indigo to a soft, dusky pink, and the stars began to dim, one by one. The glowing stream grew quiet, and the water lilies closed their petals, resting for the day ahead. The stag walked back to the depths of the forest, its antlers dimming as the morning sun rose. Silas stirred slightly in his bed, his breathing growing lighter as his body prepared to wake. The dream of the valley was slowly fading, retreating back into the midnight blue glaze of the teacup. But the peace did not leave him, it remained in the deep relaxation of his muscles and the quiet clarity of his mind. He lay still for a few moments, enjoying the warmth of the bed and the lingering sense of safety. The day was beginning. When Silas finally opened his eyes, the morning sun was streaming through the window, casting bright golden beams across his bedroom. He sat up, feeling refreshed and filled with a quiet strength. He smiled, looking toward the shop where the teacup rested. He knew that tonight, the silver path would wait for him again, and the teacup would hold another dream, ready to guide him back to the valley of rest, where the stars and the well of starlight slept.